It was a warm afternoon, and the city streets were buzzing with life. People walked in groups, some carrying shopping bags, some sipping cold drinks, and others just enjoying the sunlight after a week of rain. Inside a quiet apartment in the suburbs, a teenage girl named Emily sat at her desk, working on a school project. She didn't know that in just a few hours, her life would be discussed by strangers all over the internet. Emily had always been the quiet type. She loved reading, drawing, and attending school events with her friends. Just last month, she had gone to a charity walk organized by her school. It was a cheerful day. There were balloons, banners, and kids laughing everywhere. She had taken a few photos with her classmates, nothing unusual, just smiles and silly poses. One of her friends posted those photos on their private social media account. No one thought much about it at the time. The pictures showed Emily in casual clothes, her hair tied back, wearing the bright orange shirt given to all the students who participated in the charity walk. It was harmless, or at least it was supposed to be. On this particular afternoon, a stranger on the internet stumbled across one of those photos. No one knew who they were or why they decided to share it. But they took the image and posted it on a public page with a strange, misleading caption. The caption hinted at a connection between Emily and a well-known political figure, Donald Trump. It claimed she was related to him, specifically his niece, and added some dramatic words to make people curious. At first, the post didn't get much attention. But as the hours passed, it started spreading. Someone shared it on a discussion forum, then another person reposted it on a news commentary page. Slowly, the views climbed into the thousands. People were commenting, arguing, and making guesses about the girl in the picture. Many assumed the caption was true without even checking. Meanwhile, Emily had no idea what was going on. She was still working on her project, humming softly to herself. Her phone was on silent, lying face down on her desk. She didn't see the growing number of notifications, messages from friends, missed calls from her cousin, and even a few emails from people she didn't know. In another part of the city, Donald Trump was preparing for a public appearance. The event was supposed to focus on local business growth, and he was scheduled to give a short speech, followed by a few minutes of questions from the press. Everything was going smoothly until one of his aides rushed over with a worried look on his face. The aide whispered something into his ear, showing him a phone screen. Trump glanced at it, his brow furrowing. The photo on the phone was one of Emily at the charity walk, smiling and holding a balloon. Trump didn't recognize her. He frowned harder when he read the caption claiming she was his niece. "Where did this come from?" he asked sharply. The aide explained that it had been spreading online for the past couple of hours and that reporters might bring it up during the Q&A. Back at Emily's apartment, her phone finally buzzed loudly on the desk. She picked it up and saw over 20 unread messages. Her best friend had sent, "Emily, your picture is everywhere. Don't freak out. It's some weird post saying you're Trump's niece." Emily froze. Her heart started beating faster as she opened the link her friend had sent. There it was, her face on the screen, with hundreds of comments underneath. Some people were confused, some were making jokes, and others were arguing about whether it was true. She felt a strange mix of emotions, confusion, fear, and disbelief. Her parents weren't home yet, but Emily didn't want to wait. She called her mom, her voice shaking as she explained what had happened. Her mom listened quietly, then told her to stay calm and not reply to any messages. She promised to be home as soon as possible. The hours leading up to Trump's event were filled with tension. Newsrooms across the country had picked up the photo, running quick online articles with titles like "Mysterious Teen Linked to Trump" and "Viral Image Sparks Speculation." Most of these articles didn't have much information. They just repeated the claim from the original post and added a couple of blurry screenshots from social media. When the time for the event arrived, Trump walked onto the stage with his usual confidence, But his mind was not entirely on the speech. Cameras flashed as he spoke about local businesses and economic growth, but in the back of his mind, he wondered if someone in the audience would bring up the viral image. He didn't have to wonder for long. As soon as the Q&A started, a reporter raised their hand and asked, "Mr. Trump, do you have any comment on the viral photos claiming to show your niece?" The question hit him like a sudden gust of wind. For a brief second, he hesitated. The audience leaned forward, sensing the tension. Trump adjusted the microphone, his expression hardening. "I don't know anything about that," he said firmly, but his tone carried an edge. "I've never seen that girl in my life. This is fake news, just more nonsense from people trying to cause trouble." The reporters kept asking follow-up questions, but Trump waved them off, moving back to the original topic of his speech. Still, the moment was caught on video, and within minutes, clips of his reaction were being shared online alongside the original photo of Emily. Emily, sitting at home with her parents now by her side, watched the clip in silence. Her dad sighed, shaking his head. "This is how rumors spread," he said quietly. "One photo, and suddenly the whole world thinks they know your life story." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about how a normal school event photo had turned into a nationwide discussion. She wasn't angry, just shocked at how quickly things had spiraled. She wondered if people would forget about it in a few days, or if her face would keep appearing in headlines and posts she'd never agreed to be part of. The press hall was brightly lit, cameras lined up in every corner, their lenses focused sharply on the podium. The rows of chairs were filled with reporters, microphones ready, notepads open. Donald Trump stood behind the podium, dressed in a dark suit and a red tie, his expression a mix of composure and underlying irritation. He had gone over his speech several times that morning, making sure it focused on the positive news about local business growth. But the viral story was now pressing against the edges of his mind like a storm cloud moving in. The first few minutes of the speech went smoothly. Trump spoke about the city's rising employment rates, new investments in infrastructure, and tax cuts for small businesses. The audience clapped politely at certain points, and flashes from cameras punctuated his words. From the outside, it looked like a typical political event. But at the press table in the second row, several reporters were not writing about economic growth. Their pens hovered over their notepads, waiting for the right moment to bring up the viral photo. When the time for questions came, Trump called on a reporter in the front. The question was about trade agreements, safe territory. He answered it quickly and confidently. But then another hand shot up, belonging to a reporter from a popular online news outlet. Trump pointed toward them. The reporter stood and adjusted the microphone in front of them. "Mr. Trump, there's a photograph circulating online of a teenage girl who some are claiming is your niece. The photo has gone viral and it's receiving a lot of public attention. Do you have any comment on this?" The words hung in the air. The room went quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Trump's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment he didn't speak. It was a small hesitation, but in that silence, dozens of camera shutters clicked, capturing the moment from every angle. He leaned slightly forward toward the podium microphone. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "I've never seen that girl in my life. This is fake news, completely false. People are making things up because they have nothing better to do. It's disgraceful." The reporter tried to follow up. "So you can confirm you have no relation to her?" Trump cut them off, his voice rising a notch. "I just said that. I don't know her. This is another ridiculous attempt to distract from the real issues we should be talking about. The media loves this nonsense, but I'm not going to waste my time on it." The tone in his voice had shifted. It wasn't just irritation. It was a spark of anger. He turned his attention to another reporter, signaling that he was done addressing the subject. The press conference moved on to questions about policy, but the earlier exchange had already left a mark. Outside the hall, television crews were already sending live updates. On social media, clips of the moment were uploaded within. Minutes and hashtags related to the viral photo began trending higher. Supporters of Trump posted messages praising him for speaking firmly against false stories, while critics accused him of overreacting and drawing more attention to the situation. Back at Emily's home, the television was on, tuned to a live news channel. She sat on the couch, hugging a pillow, her parents sitting on either side of her. The news anchor replayed the clip of Trump's response, pausing at moments to analyze his tone and body language. Emily's mom sighed, muting the volume. "This is getting bigger than it should," her mom said softly. "It's just a picture from school. And now the whole country is talking about it." Emily nodded, but she didn't say anything. Her phone buzzed again on the coffee table, another message from a classmate who had seen the clip. Some friends were sending her supportive messages, telling her to ignore it, while others were asking endless questions she didn't want to answer. Her dad leaned forward. "We'll get through this," he said firmly. "Stories like this come and go. People move on. Right now, the best thing to do is stay quiet and let the truth catch up." But the truth seemed to be taking its time. Over the next few hours, several news websites published articles summarizing Trump's reaction. The headlines varied, some neutral, some sensational. A few even used side-by-side images of Emily's charity walk photo and Trump at the press conference, as if comparing them added weight to the rumor. In a small office across town, a group of journalists at an independent fact-checking site were working late into the evening. One of them, a young reporter named Daniel, had taken an interest in the story. He had traced the viral post back to an anonymous account created only 2 weeks earlier. The account had a history of posting exaggerated or misleading claims about public figures. Daniel clicked through the posts until he found the original photo of Emily on her friend's private account. It was clear the photo had been cropped and paired with a caption that wasn't true. He started writing a draft for an article that would explain exactly where the image came from and why the claim was false. Meanwhile, in the press hall, the event was winding down. Trump left through a side door, followed closely by his aides. One of them was already on the phone, speaking in a low, urgent tone. They knew this story wasn't going to disappear overnight. The more it was discussed, the more it would spread. That night, late-night talk shows played the clip of Trump's reaction, each host adding their own commentary. Some made light jokes, others criticized his tone, and a few questioned why the rumor had gained so much attention in the first place. Emily tried to avoid watching, but it was impossible to ignore the way her phone kept lighting up. Even her older brother, who lived in another city, called to check on her. "Don't worry, Em," he said over the phone. "People love a sensational story, but they forget just as quickly. This will pass." She hoped he was right. But deep down, she felt uneasy. She hadn't asked for this kind of attention, and now her face was part of a national conversation. The strangest part was knowing that most of the people talking about her didn't even know her name. The next morning, the story was still everywhere. News programs played the clip again, this time with more analysis. Social media debates continued, with some people defending Emily and others doubting the truth. The original misleading post had been deleted, but by then, dozens of copies were floating around online. Trump's team issued a short statement later that day, repeating that the claim was false and urging the public not to spread unverified information. But the statement didn't stop the discussions. It only added more fuel. Emily's mom turned off the TV and suggested they all take a walk outside. They strolled through the neighborhood, the summer air warm against their faces. For a brief moment, it felt like life was normal again. Birds sang in the trees, and the sound of children playing drifted from a nearby park. But even during that walk, Emily noticed a neighbor glance at her a little longer than usual, as if recognizing her from somewhere. It was a reminder that the story had reached far beyond the internet. That night, she sat at her desk, looking at the same spot where she had been working on her school project before all this started. She thought about how quickly everything had changed. A normal photo, a simple smile, and now she was connected to a political storm she had nothing to do with. Somewhere in the city, in a newsroom or on a talk show stage, people were still discussing her. And tomorrow it would probably be the same. She wondered when the story would finally fade away, and whether she would be able to return to the quiet, ordinary life she once had. By the time the sun had risen the next day, the internet had already decided it was not done talking about Emily's photo. It was no longer just a single post on one platform. It had spilled into every corner of social media. On video sharing apps, people were making short clips comparing her features to old photos of Trump's relatives. On discussion forums, users were creating long threads filled with guesses, theories, and even charts trying to prove their opinions. The strangest part was that most of these people didn't know Emily at all. They only knew a single picture of her in an orange t-shirt, smiling with a balloon in her hand. That one image had become the center of an endless public argument. Emily woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. She had forgotten to turn off her notifications, and overnight she had received dozens of new messages. Some were from school friends asking how she was handling all the attention. A few were from people she didn't know, sending her links to news articles that mentioned her photo. She didn't open them. She wasn't ready to see her own face in a headline again. Downstairs, her parents were sitting at the kitchen table with their morning coffee. The television was on in the background, playing a news segment. The anchor was saying, "The viral photo continues to cause a stir online. Supporters of former President Trump argue that the story is a deliberate distraction created by his political opponents. Others say the reaction to the photo is an example of how quickly rumors can spread without verification." Her mom muted the TV as soon as she saw Emily walk in. "Morning, sweetheart," she said gently. Emily sat down, picking at a piece of toast without eating much. "It's getting worse, isn't it?" she asked quietly. Her dad sighed. "People love to argue online. The more they talk, the more others want to join in. It's like a snowball rolling downhill. It gets bigger as it goes." That snowball was now rolling fast. On social media, two clear sides had formed. One group claimed the girl in the photo, Emily, had to be related to Trump because of a vague resemblance and the fact that no one had officially explained the picture. They said the press conference clip proved Trump was hiding something. The other group said it was all nonsense, pointing out that the claim came from an anonymous account with no real evidence. Video creators took advantage of the debate, posting reaction videos and commentary to gain views. Some were kind, saying Emily should be left alone. Others turned the situation into a joke, adding silly captions and sound effects to the image. A few even made harmless memes that spread, almost as quickly as the original photo. At school, Emily's friends tried to shield her from the chatter, but it was impossible to block it all out. In the hallways, whispers followed her. Some students stared, others asked questions she didn't want to answer. The principal even called her parents to check on her well-being, reminding them the school had a counselor available if she needed to talk. Meanwhile, at news stations across the country, producers debated how to cover the story. Some shows ran short segments summarizing the facts. Others hosted panel discussions, inviting guests to talk about internet culture, misinformation, and the pressures of being unexpectedly thrust into the public eye. Emily's photo appeared on screens again and again, sometimes blurred, sometimes not. In one newsroom, a journalist named Daniel, the same reporter who had begun fact-checking the post, felt frustrated. He had already tracked the image back to its source, a private social media post from one of Emily's classmates. The classmate had taken the picture at the charity walk long before any of this happened. There was no connection to Trump at All. Daniel's article explaining the truth was ready to be published, but his editor was waiting for the right timing to release it so it would get more attention. Trump's team, on the other hand, was trying to move past the issue. Advisors told him not to mention it again publicly, warning that any new comment would keep the story alive. Still, the internet didn't seem to care. The video clip of his press conference response had already been viewed millions of times. Every time it was reposted, people reignited the same arguments. Emily's mom suggested taking a break from social media entirely. For one afternoon, Emily agreed. She turned off her phone and spent time painting in her room. For a few hours, it felt like things were normal again. But later that evening, when she turned her phone back on, the messages were still there, waiting, like a crowd outside a closed door. Her older brother called again that night. "The best thing you can do," he told her, "is keep living your life. Let the noise fade into the background. It's loud now, but it won't last forever." He was right about one thing. Internet attention was unpredictable. While Emily's story was still trending, another big piece of news was starting to rise in popularity. A celebrity had announced a surprise project, and political commentators were shifting their focus to a heated debate in Congress. But instead of disappearing, Emily's photo became one of those background stories that lingered. People still shared it, but now alongside other trending topics. The following morning, Emily's dad brought in the newspaper. On page 3, there was a short column about the week's most viral moments. Her photo was one of them, with a small caption explaining that no official connection to Trump had been confirmed. Emily stared at the black and white image for a moment before folding the page and putting it aside. In living rooms across the country, strangers still discussed her without knowing anything about her real life. Some defended her privacy. Others repeated the rumor as if it were fact. And every time someone shared the photo again, the cycle continued. Late that night, Daniel finally convinced his editor to publish the fact-checking article. It was simple, straightforward, and backed by screenshots showing exactly how the post had started. The claim, the headline read, is false. Viral photo of teenage girl has no relation to Donald Trump. The article began circulating among those who had been following the debate. Some people were relieved to see confirmation of the truth. Others ignored it completely, choosing to believe the rumor anyway. But for Emily and her family, it was a small step toward clearing the air. Even so, Emily knew that once something was on the internet, it never truly disappeared. Her photo would still be out there, saved on someone's phone, sitting in an old forum post, or buried deep in the endless pages of search results. But at least now, the truth was written down somewhere for anyone who cared enough to look, as she sat in her room, the house quiet around her. Emily thought about the past few days. It was strange how quickly a normal life could turn into a public story, all because of one photo, one careless caption, and the power of the internet to turn anything into a headline. She didn't know what would happen next, but she hoped that tomorrow would be a little quieter than today. The morning after the fact-checking article was published, the air inside Trump's private office felt heavy. Sunlight spilled across the desk, but no one was paying attention to the view outside. A small group of advisors sat in a semicircle, each with a notepad or tablet in hand. Trump leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as one of his senior aides gave an update. "They're still talking about it," the aide said. "The fact check has helped, but the clip from your press conference is still trending. People aren't sharing the photo as much now, but the video reaction has taken on a life of its own." Trump frowned. "That's because the media keeps replaying it. They love catching me in a moment like that. It's ridiculous." Another advisor spoke up. "The best thing we can do right now is to let it pass. Don't mention it in interviews. If they ask again, just say no comment and move on. We've already denied it clearly." Trump tapped the desk with his finger, thinking. He didn't like leaving a story hanging, but he understood the point. The more he addressed it, the more oxygen the rumor got. Finally, he gave a short nod. "Fine. No more talking about it. Across the city, Emily's family was having a similar conversation, though in a much smaller and quieter setting. They were gathered in the living room, the coffee table cluttered with empty teacups and yesterday's newspaper. Emily's dad had read the fact-check article twice and printed out a copy. He placed it on the table in front of Emily. "This is important," he said. "Now, if anyone asks, you can just point them to this. The truth is out there, and you don't have to explain anything." Emily nodded, though she wasn't sure it would stop the questions. She had seen enough online to know that some people would never believe the article, no matter how clear it was. Still, it was comforting to have proof in writing. Her mom leaned forward. "We should also talk about your online accounts. You might want to make everything private for a while. Limit who can see your posts. That way you have a little more control." Emily agreed. That evening, she went through her accounts, changing privacy settings, deleting old photos, and blocking a few strangers who had tried to follow her. It felt strange, like she was building a wall around her own life, but it also gave her a sense of safety. Meanwhile, the independent journalist Daniel was still working. Even though his article was live, he wanted to dig deeper into the origin of the false claim. He had already traced the first post to an anonymous account, but now he discovered that the account was connected to a small network of other profiles that often posted exaggerated stories about public figures. It wasn't clear why they had chosen Emily's photo, but Daniel suspected it was simply because it was an easy way to cause a stir. He reached out to Emily's parents through a private message, offering to share his research. At first, they hesitated. They didn't want to give more attention to the matter, but eventually they agreed to speak with him over the phone. During the call, Daniel explained how the photo had been taken from a private account and altered before it was posted publicly. He also reassured them that no personal information about Emily had been leaked. "That's a relief," her mom said softly after the call. "At least they don't know anything about you beyond that one picture." Still, the emotional weight of the situation lingered. Even though the rumor had been disproven, Emily felt like she was being watched. On a trip to the grocery store with her mom, she noticed a woman in the next aisle staring at her a little too long. Was it her imagination, or did the woman recognize her from the news? The same day, in Trump's circle, the advisors prepared a quiet strategy to redirect public attention. They planned a series of public appearances focused on major policy topics, knowing the media would follow. The hope was that new headlines would push the photo story further down the list of trending topics. By the end of the week, the plan seemed to be working, at least partially. News outlets were now covering other stories, and while Emily's photo still appeared online, it wasn't dominating the conversation like before. But the internet had a long memory, and both Emily and her family knew it could resurface at any moment. One evening, Emily's dad suggested they all sit together and talk about how to handle any future attention. They agreed on a simple rule: no direct responses to strangers online, no interviews without thinking them through, and no feeding into speculation. It was during one of these conversations that Emily asked a quiet question. "Do you think things will ever go back to the way they were?" Her dad looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Maybe not exactly the same," he said. "But the noise will fade. People's attention moves fast. What matters is how we carry ourselves until then." Daniel, still working from his small office, decided to write one more follow-up article. Not about the rumor itself, but about Emily's story as an example of how quickly misinformation can spread. He left her name out entirely, referring to her only as a teenage student. The article focused on the way ordinary people could become unwilling subjects of viral content and how it affected their lives. It gained moderate attention, enough to start a conversation about online responsibility. Trump, on the other hand, didn't bring up the incident again in public, but privately, he remarked to one of his aides, "It's amazing how something so small can blow up like that. You never know what the internet will grab onto." For Emily, the quiet return to normal life came slowly. Each day there were fewer questions from classmates, fewer messages from strangers, fewer headlines with her photo. She started to feel more comfortable walking through the halls at school without glancing over her shoulder. Still, she knew the experience had changed her. She had seen how easily a single moment could be taken out of context and turned into a public spectacle. She had learned the value of privacy and how quickly the truth could be drowned out by louder voices. One night, as she was finishing her homework, she glanced at the printed copy of the fact-check article still sitting on her desk. She kept it there, not because she needed proof anymore, but as a reminder of how fast things could change and how important it was to stay grounded when they did. Outside, the world moved on to other stories, other trends, other names in the spotlight. But for Emily and her family, the lesson stayed. And somewhere, in a quiet office, Daniel kept his files and notes, knowing that this wouldn't be the last time he saw a small, simple story swell into something much bigger than it ever should have been. If you want, I can now expand Part 5 to 1,300 words, so the story has a strong and thoughtful ending, tying everything together and showing the long-term outcome for Emily, her family, and the public memory of the event. A few weeks had passed since Emily's photo had first gone viral, and life was slowly finding its balance again. The loudest voices online had moved on to new topics, and the constant stream of messages on her phone had nearly stopped. For the first time in days, Emily felt like she could breathe without wondering what people were saying about her. The weather had turned cooler, and autumn leaves began to scatter across the streets. One afternoon, Emily sat on the front porch, sketching in her notebook. It was a hobby she had loved since she was little, and it gave her a way to focus on something peaceful. Her mom stepped outside with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, handing one to her. "It's quieter now," her mom said, sitting down beside her. Emily nodded. It feels like it was a bad dream that's fading. But it hadn't faded completely. Every now and then, she still noticed small reminders of what had happened. A stranger on the bus would glance at her twice, or someone in the hallway at school would whisper her name and then pretend they weren't talking about her. It wasn't constant, but it was enough to remind her that the story had left a mark. Across the city, Daniel, the journalist who had helped clear the air, was working on a new project. He had filed away all the notes from Emily's case, labeling the folder viral photo incident. Even though he had moved on to other assignments, he still thought about it sometimes. The way one photo had spiraled into a nationwide rumor had become a personal example for him of why careful reporting mattered. In Trump's circle, the incident was rarely mentioned anymore. His advisors had succeeded in shifting public attention toward policy events and interviews on other topics. The viral clip of his press conference still existed online, but it was now buried under weeks of newer content. When it did surface occasionally in online conversations, it was usually shared as part of a larger discussion about internet rumors, rather than as a fresh story. One Saturday, Emily's family decided to go out for lunch at a small restaurant in the next town over. It was the kind of cozy place where people chatted quietly over their meals, and the smell of baked bread filled the air. For a while, everything felt normal, until Emily noticed a young woman at a nearby table looking at her phone and then glancing toward her. Emily tensed for a second, but the woman quickly looked away and continued her meal. Her dad noticed. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Emily said, forcing a smile. "I'm fine. I just thought she recognized me." Her mom reached across the table and gave her hand a squeeze. "Even if she did, it doesn't matter. You haven't done anything wrong. You don't owe anyone an explanation." Emily knew her mom was right, but part of her still wished the whole thing had never happened. She wanted to go back to the days when her photo was just a memory of a school charity event, not a screenshot people passed around online. That night, she got a message from her older brother. It was a link to a podcast episode about online privacy. The host mentioned A recent case involving a teenage girl whose image was wrongly connected to a political figure and talked about how important it was to verify information before sharing it. They didn't use her name, but Emily knew exactly which case they meant. She listened to the episode quietly in her room. It didn't make her upset. In fact, it felt good to hear someone talk about the situation in a way that was thoughtful and fair. The host even praised the fact-checking journalists who had corrected the rumor. Over the next few days, Emily noticed that whenever the incident did come up online, it was often accompanied by the truth rather than just the false claim. People were linking to Daniel's article or referencing the podcast. It was a slow change, but it was something. One afternoon after school, Emily and her best friend sat in the park, watching leaves fall into the pond. "You know," her friend said, "you handled all of this better than a lot of people would." I mean, it was crazy for a while, but you didn't let it turn you into someone you're not." Emily smiled faintly. "I had help. My family, you, everyone who told me to stay calm. I don't think I could have done it alone." Her friend tossed a pebble into the water, making small ripples. Maybe that's the point. When something like this happens, you're not supposed to handle it alone. As weeks turned into months, the viral photo story became just one small chapter in Emily's life. It was still there, tucked into the corners of the internet, but it no longer defined her. She was back to focusing on school, spending time with friends, and looking forward to the art competition she had signed up for in the spring. Daniel's follow-up piece about online responsibility gained more attention in journalism circles. Other reporters referenced it in discussions about ethics and the dangers of chasing clicks without checking facts. The incident became a quiet case study for students in media classes, who were told to imagine how they would have handled it differently. Trump's team, meanwhile, had learned their own lesson. They realized how quickly a small rumor could distract from larger goals, and they became more careful about how they responded to unexpected questions in public. For Emily, the most important lesson was personal. She had learned how to protect her privacy, how to stay calm under unwanted attention, and how to trust the people who stood by her when things felt overwhelming. She knew that the internet could be unpredictable, but she also knew that it didn't have to control her life. One chilly evening, as she sat at her desk finishing a drawing for art class, she glanced at the printed copy of the fact-check article still pinned to her corkboard. She had thought about taking it down many times, but she left it there as a reminder, not of the rumor itself, but of how it ended. It reminded her that truth, even if it took time, could still cut through the noise. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the quiet neighborhood. Inside, Emily felt something she hadn't felt since the whole thing began. Peace. She knew people might still recognize her sometimes. She knew the photo might still be somewhere, online. But she also knew that her life was hers again, and that was enough.